The first annual PowerGen Africa Conference and Exhibition got underway in Johannesburg today, bringing together leading decision makers in the industry. The idea is to have a particular focus on driving international attention to the region and encouraging growth and development of international trade and investment opportunities between sub-Saharan Africa and the rest of the world. To take a closer look at the issues, I'm joined in studio by Nigel Blackaby, who's from Penwell International Power Group. Nigel, thank you so much for joining us. A very important conference, obviously coming against the backdrop of a resurgence of the discussion around the usages and maximization of various forms of energy in the African continent. But I want to say to you, 50% of Africa is rural with no access to electricity. Africa generates less than 0.6% of the global market share. Many countries are besieged by power shortages. To what extent is your conference dealing with the practical realities of the deficiencies around energy management and usage in the continent?
Well, I think it's absolutely the focus of the conference. I think the reason that we've managed to attract the international power community and the world's top suppliers of equipment and services is precisely because of the opportunities and the challenges that Africa faces and the figures that you've given. I mean, the tragedy is that the average electricity use in Africa is 1.5% of that in North America, and I think the international community sees the opportunities to be able to address that. They see the growth that's occurring in population and urbanisation and the middle classes, and they see that they've got the technologies that are able to address that.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, one of the big stories of the African continent at the moment is, of course, these growth surges. In particular economies, places like Rwanda is doing really well. Of course, your traditional strong bases are South Africa and Nigeria. But if we take a country like Nigeria, constantly besieged by power outages, and businesses having to navigate quite a treacherous road. To what extent are you partnering up, government and businesses to deal with very big infrastructure challenges that could impede, diversification and the growth of new businesses in markets like Nigeria, for example?
Well, Nigeria is a great case in point, because you're absolutely right. I mean, the majority of people rely on distributed generation, on diesel power. They don't trust the grid. They don't trust the state authorities. But things are changing there, and our keynote speaker this morning was actually the chairman of the Presidential Commission on Power, and he outlined the changes that Nigeria have got in place. And the main change is there's going to be a switch from government-owned electricity and transmission and distribution into the private sector, and they're rolling out what they call independent power projects and inviting outside investors and outside equipment providers to effectively take over and run it on an efficient, modernised basis, and put the investment in order to begin to bring up that shortfall that currently exists.
Now, just yesterday, South Africa's Energy Minister unveiled, the first window for independent power producers. I chatted to Obakeng yesterday, who was involved in a solar project down in the Western Cape. This idea of independent power producers coming in, making the market competitive, ramping up efficiency where you've traditionally had, old state infrastructure. To what extent is the entry of the private sector into the power market and the energy sector going to, one, not just make us efficient, but ensure greater equitable access to power generation and electricity, particularly where you have huge inequalities?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question, and there's no doubt that the challenge of rural electrification is one that is going to take a long while to meet. But I think taking this first step with the renewable independent power producers in South Africa is an important first step. It's still a very, very small proportion, of course, of the overall power generation. The majority is still going to be in the hands of Eskom. They've got their own plans for expansion, and of course you're relying on Eskom as the person who's the single buyer of the power from the independent power producers and providing the grid access. So we still need to make sure that Eskom's strategy and direction is going in the right way in order for those independent power producers to operate effectively. But I think it's the right course of action, and as you know, the next step is to invite IPPs to step in and offer projects outside of renewables in fields like gas power generation or even coal.